Hi, Mira. So, you know that we've learned a lot in our Linguistics LET103 class with Dr. Peter, right? What's your favorite and most relatable part of linguistics so far? For me, it definitely has to be phonology and phonetics. You might be asking why. Well, let's say I used to wonder why the term university used the article a instead of an. Even though we were told the basics that anything that starts with A, E, I, O, U requires the use of the article an, right? Well, after
Yeah.
learning phonetics, I discovered that it's because university is pronounced with the consonant Y at the beginning, although it is spelled U with a U. So, I learned after phonetics that that is the case. What about you?
Oh my God, I found that so interesting because I did not realize at first that university is pronounced as Y, like you. I find that really interesting. For me, though, in lecture 6, we learn about language acquisition. And I feel like that's my favorite part of all the things that we've learned so far. Because you know how there's L1 and L2, and how you learn L1 is your L1 is your mother tongue or your native language, right? So for me, my mother tongue, my native language is Bahasa Melayu, and my L2 is English. And I learned that, there is a debate going um, on is language acquisition, uh, uh, do you acquire language acquisition by nature or by nurture, right? And so for me, just in my opinion, I feel like we learn language, our first language, by nature, and then our L2, L3, and so on, we learn by nurture. Because for L1, we learn from our parents, and L2, we learn in schools, for example, right? And I find it really interesting how a person or a child will shift their language from L1 to L2 because of how comfortable they feel with the certain language they use. So for me, example, um, I have to shift from Bahasa Melayu to English because of my degree, because I'm continuing an English degree. So I have to shift it, even though outside of the environment, I don't really use English as much. And my favorite part under language acquisition is the code switching part on how you can change a language or a dialect in one conversation. For example, I am asking you a question in English and you answer me in Malay, so I will answer back to you in Malay. So the change of language under one conversation or one sentence even is called code switching, and I find it really, really interesting. Um, talking about this, how do you think phonetics and phonology have impacted on how you approach things? Right? For me, example for language acquisition, when I communicate with people, I have to ask them in Malay, for example, right? So unless they're a foreigner, then I'll ask in English. But if they are just a local, I'll ask them in Malay. And depending on their answer, if they answer me in English, I would switch my code and speaking back to them in English. Or if they ask me in if I ask them a question in standard Malay, like the KL dialect, and they answer back to me in Penang, because I grew up in Penang, I will answer back to them in a Penang dialect. So, what about you?
Wow, thank you, Mira. That was very insightful. For me, knowing more about phonetics and phonology has impacted the way I approach things on a lot of different levels. For example, I now no longer wonder why words like our and honesty all use the article "n." Not to mention, knowing more about phonetics now, I am able to pronounce things more efficiently. Because you see, there's these things called phonetics alphabets. And using these alphabets, I am able to study and identify how to properly pronounce the words. The phonetical alphabetic table is extremely helpful in doing that. Well, I suppose that is all for today, Mira. It was very nice chatting to you, but I'm afraid we have classes now. See you!
Okay, see you. Bye bye.